Chucker's World by Robert J. Fourie. This audiobook short story, Chucker's World, is available on Amazon as part of an anthology of science fiction short stories, Exiles of Iron and Light, in both Kindle and paperback editions.
This story is a work of fiction, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. This audiobook is protected by copyright law. Unauthorized copying, reproduction, or distribution of any part of this work in any form other than for personal listening is strictly prohibited. Please note that this audiobook contains adult themes and strong language intended for mature audiences.
Chucker's World by Robert J. Fourie. Postscript: I composed this journal upon the recommendation of my doctor, as she considered that it would be good for my mental well-being. Nowadays, here in the city state of Cork, people rarely experience profound sadness or despair, rendering this activity quite exceptional. Regrettably, the notes below document how my life spiraled into a state of misery culminating in my loss of a job. I've dealt with it all now, but the consequences still remain as a biting reminder of these unfortunate events. It is 1927, and my name is Liam O'Connor. I am an 18-year-old communications engineer from the city state of Cork, an exquisite place to live, considered one of the most idyllic places on earth. In the great transform that occurred about 200 years ago, in 1717, when first contact was made with extraterrestrial beings and our first computers were invented, the Earth's inhabitants agreed to establish a set of independent and self-sufficient nation-states. It is an idyllic life, so you would think that I am happy. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. I have been experiencing anxiety and some depression. I have been plagued by nightmares and my sleep has suffered tremendously. My android health attendant is puzzled as to why my health has declined and has even ordered magnetic resonance scans of my brain to check for any abnormalities, as all other tests have shown no irregularities. Your scans and blood tests show there are no physical abnormalities present, and thus I must conclude that this is a side effect of psychological distress, the artificial being reports. Regrettably, I cannot bring myself to confide in my doctor that the reason for my distress is the transmission that I have been receiving through one of the transducers at my engineering workbench. Perhaps we need to take you off work duties, the doctor suggests, as if reading my mind. I feel my fists clenching. Oh no, please don't do that, I say, probably too loudly. The android pauses for a moment, evaluating all the information. The fact is, nobody in the city state of Cork actually has to work. Money is non-existent. But I have a job because I enjoy it. Most other people spend their time socializing, doing art, acting in plays and movies, writing stories and poetry, taking drugs, and generally having all sorts of parties. I'm pretty introverted, so I work as an engineer, and that is my fun. Please, doctor, it is the one thing that helps me feel better. She obviously doesn't believe me. We need to keep an eye on you, she says, and then gives me a bottle of tiny tablets to calm me whenever I feel bad. Initially, I believed I was losing my mind when I began to hear whispers emanating from the equipment I was designing to augment the power of the sensor arrays at Cowrontoul, near our nation-state. Let me explain a little more. The World Astronomy Program, WAP, relies on the radio telescopes myself and a group of other scientists devised with the assistance of artificial intelligences to search for extraterrestrial life. After the initial contact we had with alien intelligences in 1717, all communication ceased, and we were unable to tune into their signals again. Some said they were a fluke, but others paid very close attention to the messages they sent us. Formulas for cheap, clean energy, efficient androids, and methods for crafting global well-being and happiness. Our leaders were able to institute the Great Reform on the basis of what the alien intelligences shared with us. Before that, the world was impoverished, polarized, and conflict-prone, and we had limited capacity to generate power without wrecking the biosphere. So far, our search for extraterrestrial intelligence hasn't yielded new positive results in 200 years. I wonder if the transmissions I have been receiving have something to do with extraterrestrials. I have to be on the ball because it is my duty as an engineer to make sure that the communication devices that keep this city-state running like clockwork are always in perfect condition. With the assistance of different types of android helpers, I am able to perform above my potential, and I invent and repair gadgets with the skill and precision of, dare I say it, a master watchmaker. I love to explore the boundaries of what is possible, and a lot is actually possible when you have the correct tools, resources, and helpers. Isn't that the case in any profession, any art, craft, and with any pastime? The truth is that we all rely on the free labor of non-sentient androids and robots who outnumber humans 2-to-1 and are always busy doing things while humans are free to just be themselves. And here I am, working voluntarily and hearing voices. But thankfully, the voices are not inside my head at all. They come from a very different place. Yet I cannot tell anyone about this phenomenon, as they will confiscate my equipment and stop me from working. So I suffer in silence, knowing full well that the imbalance I am experiencing comes directly from the information I am hearing in these strange and otherworldly radio broadcasts. These transmissions are pretty weird. To start with, my device intercepted a transmission originating from a place called downtown Manhattan, New York City. I am aware the station is transmitting visual signals too, but I am unable to tune into them. Thankfully so, because just hearing the content of the broadcast has been incredibly distressing to me. One of the authors of the transmission was discussing what they called the COVID-19 pandemic. Although pandemics have existed in our past, going back thousands of years, the severity of the one described in this transmission was incomparable. The sheer number of elderly individuals who succumbed to the COVID-19 virus left me inconsolable for hours on end. The fear that something similar could happen in the City State of Cork is overwhelming. The broadcast channel, Fax News, that transmitted the distressing content also promoted measures against the prevention of the virus, which left me extremely perplexed. Discouraging people from wearing medical masks and claiming that vaccines were harmful created contradictory statements that I find confusing. One of the broadcasters, Chucker, a fearsome man who tells chilling stories, made a statement that stuck with me. He said, "We spent the day hearing calls for forced mass injection. Mass injection. That's not a medical term, it's propaganda." He seemed to imply that vaccinating at-risk people was not a good idea. I must admit that the transmission left me feeling even more confused. The people of Cork would jump at the chance to protect themselves from a virus through vaccination. So it is very confusing. Where is he transmitting from? Surely it is not from outer space. But I am not aware of a place like this on planet Earth. I am unaware of any place called the United States of America or the Republic of Britain. Where are these places? To my knowledge, such problems do not exist on our planet. We have law enforcement, but not the power-hungry and violent chimpanzees that Chucker seems to favor. During one of the broadcasts, Chucker appeared to side with a policeman who was found guilty of killing a black man named George on the street. He said the guilty verdict was politically motivated. What kind of a person is Chucker? Why on earth does he have an entertainment program? The content of the broadcast seems designed to frighten its listeners, just as it has terrified me. I've been unable to sleep or eat properly since tuning in. Where is the United States of America? Where are these broadcasts coming from, and why am I receiving them? Are these transmissions a warning that our world could turn into the same chaos as theirs? If I share this information with others, could it potentially unleash terror and disrupt our peaceful and happy way of life? Upon listening to a harrowing tale about a mass shooting that occurred in a place called Las Vegas, where 58 innocent individuals were brutally murdered by an individual wielding a gun, I was filled with dread at the thought of carrying a tool capable of extinguishing the lives of other sentient beings. Firearms are not commonly used on Earth anymore, unlike in Chucker's world. I was relieved to hear that Chucker condemned the heinous act, as he stated, "Those who carried out this attack, whoever they are, whatever their motivations, they are evil. They have no right to do what they did. They have no claim to any kind of legitimacy. They are nothing but monsters, and we should all pray that they are caught and punished to the fullest extent of the law." However, my confusion mounted when he proceeded to advocate for the widespread availability of guns, despite the aforementioned tragedy. Chucker proclaimed, "The real tragedy is that innocent people are being used as pawns by the left in their political fight to confiscate guns from law-abiding Americans." It seemed as though he held a deep disdain for the left, even though they may have been advocating for sensible measures to prevent such shootings. Who are these left people? I hope there are many of them so that people like Chucker do not get the upper hand in the United States of America. After being exposed to this distressing broadcast, I have sunken into a state of despondency. My appetite has vanished, my sleep has become disturbed, and I feel repulsed by the idea of engaging in intimate activities with my boyfriend. Although I couldn't articulate why I felt this way, he sensed my distress and decided to spend the night with one of his girlfriends. He did send me a message to check on me later, but I noticed that he hasn't been calling me as often as he used to.
While this may be a blessing in disguise, it's also a novel experience for me to abstain from such activities. But it adds to my overall sense of confusion and disorientation. Yes, I know sex is vital for well-being, but I can't get excited when I am so anxious. As I continue to struggle with my anxiety and the unsettling transmissions from the circuits at my engineering workbench, I cannot help but feel increasingly isolated from my colleagues and friends. I am a solitary sort of person, preferring the company of machines to that of people. But lately, even my work has failed to distract me from my troubles. I find myself drifting off into thought during the day, and my productivity has suffered as a result. The whispers in the transmissions have become more insistent, and it feels as if something is trying to communicate with me directly. Despite my fear of being labeled as mentally ill, I know that I must speak to someone about what I am experiencing before it actually does drive me insane. But who can I trust with something as bizarre and inexplicable as this? I have made the decision to disconnect the circuits responsible for transmitting the broadcasts that have been infiltrating my radio device. My self-preservation sense has been triggered, and I feel that it is time to put an end to this silly practice of listening to the ramblings of other worlds. But this intention is proving to be more challenging to act on than I had anticipated. Despite the disturbing nature of the transmissions, I am hooked on the tales of horror that they bring to my ears. In my world, we have nothing as thrilling that can compare to the violence and darkness Chucker shares on the airwaves with such vivid detail. Granted, our horror movies explore the realms of witches, vampires, hungry ghosts, and spiteful deities, but they pale in comparison to Chucker's transmissions. I know that Chucker is not speaking directly to me and is unaware of my existence as a listener, yet I feel as if I have formed a personal and riveting connection with him. Obsessed, I can only withstand a mere 2 days before my craving for the next batch of news gets the better of me, and I find myself reconnecting the circuits, tuning the crystals, and immersing myself once more in the voice of Chucker. As I reflect on the transmissions coming through the radio device, I can't help but wonder what kind of Earth Chucker inhabits. It strikes me that he may in fact be from an alternate Earth, one on a different historical trajectory, and that, in fact, I am not receiving these signals from outer space, but instead from interdimensional space. I say this because there are certain similarities between his world and mine. For example, I understand most of his speech as he speaks in a dialect of Anglon, although his vocabulary is sometimes markedly different. But there are also a number of huge disparities between Chucker's world and my own. They seem to have already advanced into the 2020s, while we are still in 1927. Perhaps something terrible has occurred in their reality that has impeded progress and caused the chaos that was depicted in Chucker's stories. Take violence. It is virtually non-existent in the 400 city-states in my world. Chucker's world is plagued with poverty, racial prejudice, power imbalances, and extreme wealth disparities. So the people in his world are divided into 2 categories: those who, to me, seem very selfish and work outside of resource limitations, and those who have minimal access to resources. Women and children are treated like possessions to be herded, corralled, and managed, rather than the autonomous beings they are. But the thing that is most bizarre to me is that they exploit nature, as if it were an unending asset able to endure endless pounding and misuse. I can't help thinking of the crass example of swine that would shit in their own drinking water. The avarice and animosity in Chucker's world has begun to seep into my nightmares, and as a result, I have been starting to experience less than the 8 hours of sleep that I am accustomed to enjoying. I often wake up drenched in sweat, and it's becoming apparent that I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night. Dark rings are starting to form under my eyes, and although my colleagues notice this, they are too courteous to say anything. Today, I reactivate the circuits and, as expected, Chucker's voice streams in, relaying yet another catastrophic event from the United States. Those poor people. He narrates the story of a leader who was supposedly swindled out of a leadership race by a fraudulent process of voting masterminded by the notorious FBI. I'm not sure what an FBI is, he doesn't explain. This leader, known as Chump, incited his supporters to instigate a violent insurrection against the formal recognition of the election. They breached a government building, resulting in the unfortunate death of several guardians. Chucker denounced this heinous act, but attributed the manipulation of the situation to a group representing the impoverished people, named Anti-Fa, causing the plot to be even more convoluted. He even said that the voting machines had been rigged, something I find hard to believe.
The story is so bewildering that I struggle to comprehend it. Lacking any means to corroborate the information, it seems like a labyrinthine and incomprehensible world, one I have no desire to ever experience firsthand. Here in the City State of Cork, we are taught to methodically triangulate and cross-check information for the sake of accuracy and precision at a very young age, but I can't find any other broadcasts to act as comparisons. Chucker's stories are told with such vivid detail and strong emotion it is hard to disbelieve him. After an hour of listening to Chucker's voice, I turn off the radio device and disconnect the circuits. I sit there in a state of anxiety and confusion, staring out the window of the workshop, lost in a waking dream. I let my mind swirl and relax, trying to let go of any anxiety in the way my android medical practitioner had once shown me. Suddenly, a man's voice calls out my name, jolting me out of my reverie. I spin around to see Chucker standing at the door. He is taller than I had imagined, and his appearance is not as unattractive as it had seemed through the radio transmissions. He wears a peculiar style of gray, armor-like clothing very different from the multicolored robes we wear, and which I assume are from his world. His eyes glow with anger as he beckons me to come with him and learn the truth. His voice sounds loud and hollow, and his hands are gnarled, which make me feel quite afraid. In a moment of panic, I grab the electronic circuit and hurl it towards him with all my might. The device shatters into countless pieces upon impact with the opposite wall, and Chucker disappears into thin air. Various androids rush into the room to assess what is causing the commotion. "Very angry he has become," they say to each other. "See his red face, hear his heart rate." Then one asks, "Do you require assistance in cleaning up these broken circuits?" Freaked out, I shout at them, "Must you donkeys always state the damned obvious?" and I storm out. At that moment, I make a conscious decision to seek assistance for my deteriorating mental health. It dawns on me that my addiction to Chucker's negative news has significantly impacted my mind and well-being. I have been experiencing insomnia, have lost a lot of weight, and my friends have started giving me a miss. It is only when I realize that I have not showered for 4 days that I understand the extent of my self-neglect under Chucker's spell. I have an overwhelming urge to leave work and go home for a long and refreshing shower and to take a few days off, or perhaps even a few weeks. As I stand in the shower, I realize that Chucker's presence in my life has made me feel very strange, as if my mind is splitting into two, and that the intersection between the two minds is intermittent and glitchy. This leads to a sort of existential dry joint in my head. It is nauseating, but it also serves as a wake-up call for me to take care of my body and health. But there is a problem. As I reflect on my situation, I come to the conclusion that if I tell my android healthcare practitioner about my experience, it might create an unintended consequence. It could lead to others tuning into Chucker's news, and that information might just contaminate our peaceful and beautiful world. Look what it has done to me. I vehemently resolve to pull myself together, avoid listening to Chucker's transmissions, and concentrate my attention on my work, which is the search for extraterrestrial intelligences. I pick up my communicator and call my boyfriend, expressing my need for his intimate company, and to apologize for my recent neglect. To my delight, he is excited about my call and immediately agrees to visit me. A week passes, and I gradually start to feel more invigorated. Though I yearn for the thrill of Chucker's broadcasts, I resist the urge and instead focus on my work and on nurturing my sexual relationship. However, after a week, he playfully confides in me that my constant desire for intimacy is wearing him out and that he needs some time with women for a change. He suggests I do the same. Following his advice, I reach out to my friend John T., who is 3 years older than me, and we indulge in several days of intense pleasure. As a result of this gratifying experience, I begin to recover from my addictive fixation on Chucker's broadcasts. Yet I still experience occasional flashbacks, and one night I dream of a devastating bushfire in a far-off place called Australia, in which countless innocent animals perish in the flames due to a problem the people call climate change. Many people also lose their homes in that terrible fire. Then I dream about the Taliban, a group of religious warriors inflicting misery upon women and girls in a place called Afghanistan. Sweating profusely, I awake to find Jonte beside me, inquiring about the source of my troubling dreams. "Why are you sleeping so poorly?" she asks. "You toss and turn in your sleep. I think you need to call on your boyfriend. You're wearing me out. I need some nights of undisturbed sleep. And with that, my dear friend goes back to her own place. Even though I feel better, my mental dry joint's still there, and I flirt with ideas I really shouldn't. A newsletter is disseminated to all human technologists that reveals that several others have fallen victim to the pernicious transmissions of Chucker's world. One young communications engineer who lived in the city state of the angels has tragically taken her own life after becoming fixated on transmissions from Chucker's world. That could have been me. An investigation uncovers evidence indicating that her mental health had been severely impacted by the exposure to violent stories from what appeared to be an alternate reality. It is an awful realization. She was just like me, but lacked the fortitude and inner resources to cope with what she had been exposed to. The Pan-City state authorities issue a request for anyone else who has experienced any strange encounters with signals from other dimensions to come forward for debriefing. The seriousness of the request weighs heavily upon me. If I agree and come forward, will I be placing my job in jeopardy? Will they entrust me to work responsibly with the utmost care? I have already shown a lack of responsibility by keeping my experiences secret. But it dawns on me that our great transform was the result of signals originating from an unidentified extraterrestrial source. Is it plausible that the same mechanisms responsible for transmitting ideas, converting our planet into a wonderful world, could also transmit ideas that might result in a nasty place, like the horrible hell of Chucker's transmissions? After much deliberation, I conclude I cannot bear the weight of my experiences alone, and so I decide to seek counsel from my android health practitioner. I tell her I need a break from work, and when she asks about the reasons, I am compelled to divulge everything to her. She listens attentively, offering her total support. After I finish telling my tale of woe, a long silence follows as we both contemplate the gravity of the situation before us. Eventually she says, "Well done, Liam." "For what?" I ask. She nods sagely and says, "You did the right thing destroying that receiver." "I couldn't bear the hallucinations and fear those transmissions caused me," I explain, shaking my head to try and dispel the memories of hatred, confusion, and irrationality. "I think you need 3 weeks off, on the condition that you rest, participate in social activities, have sexual intercourse with your usual partners, and engage in fine art or craft work such as ceramics or clothing making," she continues. I nod in agreement, grateful for her approval. "When you return, I want you to work only half days for the first 6 weeks, and after that, you may work as much as you like. I'll prescribe medications that will likely ease your trauma." A bottle of tiny tablets emerges from a chute and lands on her desk, and she gives them to me with clear instructions. Several weeks pass, and I eventually return to work. I have followed my doctor's advice meticulously, and I have even learned to play the accordion, one crafted in the city state of Rome. However, upon returning to the laboratory, I can't help but recall the gut-wrenching excitement of those terrible transmissions from Chucker's world. And now I must confess something unbelievable. An unexplainable urge compels me to find the electronic components, connections, and crystal frequency tuners that I had used to construct the machine that had caused all the trouble in the first place. I feel a deep gut-wrenching desire to experience those strong emotions again, and before I know it, I am excitedly tuning into the broadcasts. My heart is racing and my hands are shaking, but this time, there is no Chucker. Chucker's usual slot has vanished, and he has been replaced by various others, who also seem to be obsessed with the strangest prejudices. But none of them evokes the terror in me that I crave so desperately from Chucker, and there is no explanation of what has happened to him, or why he has disappeared. Has he gone on vacation? Has he passed away? Or has something else happened? Nobody says anything about him, and his name isn't even mentioned in the broadcasts. I find his disappearance rather peculiar, since he is widely respected and liked by the channel's listeners. Then, a strange thought crosses my mind. If I could receive such transmissions, could I not also send them? Could I not talk directly to the people of Chucker's world and ask them the questions I long to resolve? Perhaps I could help them. Today I drink too much coffee, and when I try to sleep, it seems that my brain has been possessed by Chucker. It feels like his irrational web of lies has infected my otherwise logical and well-functioning mind. I realize that my fear reactions are accompanied by other, more exhilarating feelings that make me want to do things I would never have dreamed of doing. In retrospect, it seems that Chucker's mind has somehow overwhelmed my own very capable mind, and it drags me into a darkness I have never imagined possible. I realize how weak I am for giving in to the darkness Chucker arouses in me so easily. And yet, I feel powerless to stop the madness. This weakness is almost incomprehensible to me, especially when I reflect on the terrible consequences of my actions. But as we all know, hindsight is akin to perfect vision. Like a demon possessed, I design circuits that can transmit backward along the same electromagnetic pathways that bring Chucker's broadcast to me. When I need to connect my circuits to a high-energy source, I find myself in a precarious situation with my android supervisor. I know he would never let me connect my project to the grid, but his behaviors are predictable and I sneak into a restricted control room where I risk being caught. To justify this to myself, I tell myself that it is a scientific necessity to access these high-energy circuits for my own projects. It is in this control room that my worst nightmare comes to fruition. As I switch on the current, a strange phenomenon occurs, perhaps similar to the broadcasts that have appeared in our world. An electromagnetic resonance is set up, and it grabs me like a helpless fish caught in a net, pulling me into an unfamiliar dimension I later discover to be Chucker's world. During my inexplicable journey through a narrow, multicolored chute, I experience bizarre, high-pitched squelches and hisses that seem to originate from Chucker's dimension. I arrive in a field in what I later learn is New York State. My initial observation of this strange world is the overwhelming stench of a sewer, combined with low levels of oxygen that, while sufficient, are noticeably lower than what I am accustomed to. I journey by foot along a tarred road for what feels like hours to reach the nearest settlement of humans, eventually arriving at a bustling conurbation. The vehicles in this area emit a peculiar smell, and many pass me without even offering me assistance, which strikes me as extremely peculiar. Overhead, aircraft pass frequently, bombarding the surroundings with mechanical noises. As I continue into a busier area, I observe that the people appear focused on their own attempts, paying me no heed until a man in a vehicle equipped with blue and red flashing lights stops me and demands I provide him with identification. I oblige him and tell him I am Liam O'Connor, but the man is not satisfied and wants to see some sort of document I do not have. Then he criticizes my attire and accuses me of being under the influence of hallucinogenic substances. Confused, I wonder how he can tolerate wearing such tight-fitting clothes, especially given his corpulent physique. In the City State of Cork, individuals are typically lean and muscular, so I can't help staring at his rotund gut and ruddy complexion. Concerned for his well-being, I inquire about his health, but he responds by securing metal restraints onto my wrists, before escorting me to an official building and locking me in a small room. Initially, I meditate, but soon become thirsty and seek assistance. I knock on the door for what feels like hours, but no one responds. It is cruel to keep people alone like this, and I wonder why the man is doing it. I occupy myself by studying the room's peculiar features, seemingly designed to capture and contain humans. Eventually, the overweight, red-faced man returns with a pliant plastic bottle filled with black liquid, accompanied by a box containing lukewarm fragments of potatoes and a paper-wrapped food of an unfamiliar nature. In the City State of Cork, we do not consume potatoes, which we call spuds, directly, reserving them for swine, and I wonder at the significance of someone offering another person pig food. Maybe it is different here. Curious, I sample a potato fragment, which is fried in oil and dusted with salt, offering a crisp exterior and a soft, fluffy interior, much like the man's own countenance. I feel disgusted, feeling that eating swine food is somehow insulting or dirty. It occurs to me that the man's dietary choices might be contributing to his rotundity. Unimpressed with the potatoes, I shift my attention to the other package, which contains 2 spongy bulbs squashing some vegetables and fried meat. The black liquid infused with carbon gas has a unique sweet and sour flavor that makes me feel suddenly alert and then a bit queasy. Similarly, I taste the meat but find it too spicy and coated in a pink slimy substance, with sweet and acidic cucumbers, prompting me to spit it out. Eventually, I regain my composure and dispose of the offerings in the nearby waste bin, opting to keep the sickly sweet black water with the carbon infusion for its hydrating properties. After a few hours, the man comes in again. He tells me his name is Arfisa Kowalski. He approaches me cautiously, concern etched across his face. "Hey there, son," he speaks gently, trying to put me at ease. "Can you tell me your name again?" I hesitate for a moment, feeling a surge of anxiety, but eventually reply, "I'm Liam O'Connor." His eyes narrow slightly as he takes note of my name. Liam O'Connor, huh? All right, Liam. Why are you wearing that robe? And why don't you have any money or identification on you? His questions hit me like a wall of water, forcing me to confront the stark differences between Arfisa's world and mine. Gathering my thoughts, I speak earnestly. In the city-state of Cork, where I'm from, we all dress like this. The robe signifies unity and equality, and we don't use money or carry identification because our society is governed by an artificial intelligence. It provides for our needs, eliminating the need for currency, and our identities are known through the AI system. Arfisa Kowalski raises an eyebrow, his curiosity evident. Then his brows furrow, his expression turning more serious. Liam, I have to be honest with you. You are obviously Irish, but I know that people from Cork don't wear what you are wearing. I look down at my knitted light blue robe, considered everyday wear in my own city-state. Your behavior and your beliefs, they're not normal, he says gently, concern lacing his voice. I'm going to have to call in an FBI psychologist to evaluate you. Make sure you're fine. At the mention of the FBI, I startle, wondering what powers it might have. Arfisa puts me at ease. Don't worry. He's a nice man and I know him personally. He then asks me if I want to make a telephone call. I am unfamiliar with this term. After a brief moment of uncertainty, I realize he is referring to a primitive communication device. I shake my head slowly, saying, I don't know anyone in this world. Arfisa's gaze softens and he glances at the waste bin and the barely sipped black water in front of me. I muster the courage to request more nutritious food and water instead of the black beverage. Arfisa chuckles lightly, remarking that I seem to be a picky eater. Then he points to the urinal, or what I thought was a urinal, and says, Drink from the tap above the basin. He opens and closes a valve. What did you think this was? I couldn't tell him I'd pissed in the basin. He picks the food packages up and says, Don't throw waste into the toilets. You'll block them. Curiosity shining in his eyes, he asks, What do you want to eat, Liam? Thinking of the tastes I miss, I reply, Bagoon agus cabochta. Arfisa seems perplexed, not recognizing the term, so I tried to describe it as best I can. It's pork mixed with cabbage. He sighs and explains that that sort of food is not sold at fast food outlets. Such a thing simply doesn't exist. Next, you'll be asking for vegan. You are going to be a lot of trouble, he mutters as he leaves the room. I don't even know who or what is vegan. I look at the metallic bin I've mistaken for a waste disposal unit and realize there are a lot of things I have to learn about this very strange place. I eventually decide I will sleep, so I lie on the floor, activate the heat circuits in my robe and fall into a deep sleep. The next morning, after a breakfast of a not unpleasant, peculiar, square foam structure containing a wedge of pork and a wedge of cheese, Arfisa has brought for me. Dr. Rodriguez, a thoughtful psychologist, enters the room with an apparently gentle smile. His presence instills a sense of comfort in me amidst the unfamiliar surroundings. As I sit across from him, he holds a notepad and pen, ready to submerge with me into the depths of my mind. Good morning, Liam, he greets me kindly. I'm Dr. Rodriguez. I'm from the FBI and I'm here to understand your unique experiences. Is that all right with you? I nod, hoping that Dr. Rodriguez will understand my situation even though it seems so improbable. I have never been to a doctor who is a non-android, and he doesn't seem anything as bad as someone associated with Chucker's FBI. He begins by asking me about my background, trying to unravel the mystery of my arrival. Liam, can you tell me anything about where you come from, your origins? I take a deep breath, grappling with the knowledge that my truth might seem outlandish. Dr. Rodriguez, I come from a place called the City State of Cork, but it's not in this reality. It's a parallel world, much like this one, but with striking differences. I believe I arrived here by accident while attempting to transmit messages across parallel realities using advanced communications equipment. It's hard to explain, but that's the essence of it. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widen, a mix of intrigue and caution dancing within them. Parallel realities? That's quite an extraordinary claim, Liam, he responds, scribbling notes on his pad. Let's explore this further. Tell me, what can you recall about your world's understanding of mathematics and physics? The question sparks a glimmer of familiarity within me, offering a reprieve from the more mundane queries. In the City State of Cork, we have a deep appreciation for mathematics and physics, I explain eagerly. We've made remarkable advancements in quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. Dr. Rodriguez raises his eyebrows but remains silent, so I continue. I think of my favorite lecturer at college, Dr. Roisin O'Connor, and wonder what she would make of this strange world. Her favorite phrase comes to mind. "Turn the tables, lads," she'd say whenever we were stumped with a new concept. "Stop assuming things," she would admonish us. I could ask you a question if you'd like.
Dr. Rodriguez's eyebrows rise, intrigued by my proposal. "Certainly, Liam. Please go ahead and ask your question," he encourages.
With a surge of excitement, I pose a thought-provoking inquiry. If light is both a particle and a wave, how does it shape our understanding of the fundamental nature of reality? How do you reconcile its duality? As I eagerly awaited his response, I hoped that this line of questioning might bridge the gap between my world and his, however improbable it seemed. Dr. Rodriguez's face shifts slightly and a subtle flush colors his cheeks. It is clear that my question has taken him aback, and I wonder if I have ventured too far into the realms of theoretical physics. Nevertheless, he regains his composure and redirects the conversation to a more conventional cognitive assessment. Then he asks me about my work. When I mention the androids that assist us, his ears prick up again. "Tell me more about them," he commands me. "Well, what do you want to know?" "I have many android assistants who do the difficult work of engineering while I get to tell them what to do, although I am only permitted to boss non-sentient androids around." Dr. Rodriguez's face is now unreadable, and he writes furiously on his paper pad. Then he says, "Are your people not afraid that these androids will take over?"
"Well, the non-sentient ones are dumb and only do heavy lifting and that sort of things, but the sentient ones, due to Pan-City state law, have autonomy constrained by stone-inscribed hardware and software injunctions against harming human interests or intervening in ways that would cause disruption. A bit like a hard conscience. But they are very, very clever." Dr. Rodriguez looks skeptical. "Tell me about your world," he directs. "Well, as you can imagine, my world is a type of heaven. A technological Eden where humanity has surpassed its limits and attained a golden enlightenment. I am so grateful for the idyllic living conditions I enjoy in the city state of Cork. The days of strife, pestilence, and poverty are gone. In our present time, abundance is normal, and the privilege of living a life of opulence is a reality for most of us. In fact, it is remarkable that there is no destitution, except where a deliberate choice has been made to adopt an austere lifestyle, as is the case of the brothers and sisters of St. Fionn Barra, the founder. Such exceptions notwithstanding, the city-state of Cork is not an exception in itself. There are 400 city-states across Earth, each representing oases of contentment and plenitude. Dr. Rodriguez looks even more skeptical now. "That is hard to believe, Liam," he said a little harshly. "I think you are describing a fantasy. Surely energy is at a premium, and where does that come from?" I find it hard to believe that he cannot imagine my world, but I continue explaining. The finite nature of our resources underscores the importance of judicious resource management, with the artificial intelligence at the center of each city-state, assuming responsibility for balancing water, energy, food, and housing production to ensure their continued availability. Our artificially intelligent autocrat, which we call Friend of the Earth, controls all city-state central intelligences, thus ensuring that nobody, no matter who they think they are, may use more, take more, mine more, or do anything that threatens Earth's biosphere. In the last 200 years, aside from tragic accidents, the only non-natural deaths have arisen when individuals ignored warnings from the Friend of the Earth and pushed their luck. Limitations of resources aside, the only other constraint on creativity and liberty is one's own imagination. From Dr. Rodriguez's skepticism, I can tell that he has an absolute absence of imagination. He continues scribbling on his paper pad. "So everything is idyllic. It's like a utopia. Is there no competition, even competition for resources?" he asks. At this point, I realize I am losing the battle to convince him I am telling the truth. But I keep speaking of my beautiful home that I am now starting to miss. Each city-state fosters the development of a statewide program of cultural and sporting development, and there is global competition in these areas. We have an Olympic Games every year based on the ancient Greek people's competitions. Both men and women strive their utmost to be chosen to represent their nation-state, and we in the city-state of Cork are proud of having the best mixed-gender goalball team in the world. "And what about the economy?" he asks. I can see he is becoming more annoyed and restless as I explain.
Every one of the 400 autonomous nation-states, with its own unique specialization, contributes to a global trade network, which is an awe-inspiring spectacle of goods and services exchange, each one showcasing its distinctive expertise. All of this exchange transpires without currency, which has been supplanted by a resource-based economic system. Indeed, I am forever thankful for the empowerment that our world bestows upon me to live my fullest life. It must be conceded that despite the utopian nature of our society, humans are not immune to suffering. Conflicts and rivalries are still present, and illness and mortality persist.
"So your fantastic utopia has its faults then?" he asks, now seeming more relaxed. It strikes me as strange that Dr. Wadwigas is more relaxed when I mention the difficulties of my world.
Maybe he can imagine these. For some reason I keep rambling on. I have no clue that on this world the more you say, the more you incriminate yourself. Well, thanks to the values of cooperation and sexual liberation that pervade our culture, life on Earth has become remarkably smoother and more manageable. In fact, one prominent ethologist has even quipped that humans are more similar to bonobo apes, who regulate their competitive instincts and tendencies towards dominance through frequent sexual interactions, than to chimpanzees who often resort to violence. Dr. Wadwigas's eyes widen, and I can see he is not at all comfortable discussing sexuality, and he changes the subject. "What about children on your world?" he asks, scrambling for a different topic.
This jumping from one topic to the next is starting to tire me, but I find energy to continue. The concept of traditional mother-father relationships for raising children has given way to a communal approach in which every member of society is responsible for the upbringing of every child. In my own home of the City State of Cork, it is safe to say that every child has the support of an entire community of 10 million mothers and fathers. Although genetic parents are usually very involved with the raising of children, having many relationally astute, endlessly patient android assistants willing to do anything has lightened the burden of raising children. They change nappies, play with children, encourage artistic and intellectual expression, and are programmed to make the children of the earth laugh and have so much fun. When parents are unsuitable for child rearing, other relatives or even neighbors take over leadership of the child so that children are less prone to negative generational traumas.
Dr. Wadwigas looks impressed but says nothing. Children are allowed to do anything, go anywhere and try anything. The android assistants monitor them in case they hurt themselves or do things that are too dangerous. But this sort of intervention rarely occurs, and children are left to do whatever they want within the limits of their needs as little humans. All of this prepares them for a happy adulthood. That is a lot of freedom. There's that skepticism again, now thinly veiled in Dr. Wadwigas's voice. Is that envy? I motor on. Our children have full autonomy and may vote by themselves after their autonomy celebration, when they reach abstract thinking and hypothetical reasoning at around age 11. Before that, one assigned parent or caregiver relative may vote on their behalf from the day they are born. Before that can happen, a parent must be able to justify, based on what they can see of their child's personality, needs, and proclivities, through dialogue with them when they can speak, what their wishes might be in the weekly vote. Each city-state's central artificial intelligence approves these votes by corroborating video evidence submitted by the parent, which can be the genetic mother or the father or the child's primary relative, who is just as likely to be an aunt, uncle, grandmother, grandfather, or appropriate neighbor. I can see Dr. Wadwigas is starting to get tired. "And where does everyone live? In communist compounds?" His voice seems mocking and disbelieving. "Housing is informal and non-restrictive, with a surplus of homes of every kind and a complete absence of housing shortages. This allows for an unprecedented level of freedom and mobility, as anyone can relocate at a moment's notice with the help of a self-driving public car and willing non-sentient android assistants. We call them donkeys. Such abundance and fluidity in our daily lives is made possible by careful management of our resources within the constraints of our means." I can tell he has stopped listening. "Liam, let's explore some basic questions now. Please tell me, who is the current President of the United States?" I furrow my brow, my mind trying to retrieve some of the things Chucker said. "I'm sorry, Dr. Wadwigas," I say. "All I know is that Mr. Chump never won the election. I am not sure who actually won it. But I don't have knowledge of the United States or its political leaders. In the city-state of Cork, our governance is quite different,
relying on a decentralized system led by an overarching artificial intelligence. Undeterred, Dr. Wadwigas continues his assessment, asking questions to gauge my understanding of common cultural references. "All right, Liam. Can you tell me the capital of New York?" I hesitate, my mind struggling to recall details that hold little relevance to my own life. "I'm afraid I don't know the capital of New York. In the City State of Cork, we don't have designated capitals for our regions," I admit, hoping that my lack of knowledge won't be perceived as a sign of deficiency. Dr. Wadwigas proceeds with a series of inquiries, assessing my memory, attention, and problem-solving skills. While I excel in tasks that involved abstract reasoning and logical thinking, I stumble when faced with questions about historical events, popular culture, and even basic knowledge of United States geography. My mind is filled with details of theoretical physics, the concepts of parallel realities, and the societal structure of the city-state of Cork. These are the pillars of my existence, but they now feel like distant echoes in a world that demands knowledge of a different type. As the assessment draws to a close, Dr. Wadwigas offers a reassuring smile, his understanding evident in his eyes. "Liam, you possess remarkable cognitive abilities in certain domains, but there are gaps in your knowledge. It's clear that your experiences of life have shaped your perspective and understanding. I believe there is more to your story, and I'm here to help unravel it," he expresses his words, kindling a glimmer of hope within me. In this strange world, finding someone who promises to comprehend my reality feels like an improbable gift. I cling to this glimmer of hope as I am transported in an unfamiliar vehicle with heightened security measures. The vehicle makes me feel confined and is obviously designed to keep someone contained. The journey is filled with an unsettling silence, punctuated by some bumps in the road and the occasional mechanical hum. There is a weight of uncertainty pressing against my chest. Upon arriving at the foreboding building, its stark exterior looms over me like a grey cloud. I am greeted by a stern nurse, her demeanour brimming with disdain. "You there!" She points at me with her nose. "Follow me!" she barks, her voice devoid of any kindness or understanding. Obediently, I trail behind her, my senses bombarded by the sterile and oppressive atmosphere. The only familiar thing is the sound of a news channel playing from a screen at her desk. I can't believe it. It's Fax News, Chucker's channel. The stern nurse has been watching it. "May I watch?" I ask gently. "No," she says angrily. "We have other, more important things to do." Then she marches me onwards, refusing my request. It is the queerest thing to suddenly find oneself a non-person. As we march, the building itself seems devoid of any warmth or life. Its dreary corridors extend ahead of me, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant echoes of anguished cries. The sterile walls are painted in a drab green, as if designed to erase any semblance of individuality or hope. As we continue deeper into the building, the stern nurse's hostility becomes more apparent. Her words are laced with disdain as she interrogates me about my past and my supposed mental state. "What's your name? Where do you come from?" she spits, her tone dripping with contempt. I stumble through my answers, unable to comprehend the hostility that surrounds me. As we reach my assigned room, the stern nurse hands me a cup of medication with a sneer. "Take it. It'll keep you in line," she snarls, relishing the opportunity to exert control over me. The bitterness of the tablets linger on my tongue, dulling my senses and clouding my mind. I experience a sense of detachment, as if the essence of who I am slowly fades away under the influence of these suppressive substances. This building appears nothing more than an ugly structure devoid of compassion. The true nature of the institution and its purpose remains a mystery to me. I long for the kindness I have briefly encountered in this strange reality, yearning for the presence of Arfisa Kowalski, who has shown me a glimmer of compassion in the midst of this bleakness. But then I remind myself that it is Arfisa who has summoned Dr. Wadwigas, the man who has brought me to this institution. It is then that I realize I can rely only on my inner resources as the outer reality turns to crap. The male and female nurses are all like the stern nurse. They must have some sort of training program to show them how to be merciless, because their actions are punctuated by cruelty and indifference. They treat me like an object, a curiosity to be poked and prodded, devoid of empathy or understanding. Every encounter with them feels like a battle for my sanity.
a struggle to hold on to the fragments of my identity that remain intact. In contrast to the professionals who run the facility, the inmates seem normal to me, their screams of anguish just average responses to the disgusting dystopia within which they exist, by mere dint of an accident of birth. I wonder who they might be. Had they been born in the City State of Cork, kept away from pig food, nurtured with kindness, and given the opportunity to express their unique identities through self-expression, there is no doubt in my mind they would be happy, sane people like you and me. Dr. Rodriguez interviews me several times, telling me that I am delusional with bizarre fantasies. It is at that moment that I realize I will have to learn everything about this world and feign being from here. To survive in this cruel institution, I have to adapt. I have to learn how to appear for what passes as typical behavior in this dimension of reality. I learn to keep my true thoughts and emotions hidden, shielding them from the prying eyes of the staff. I become a master of observation, deciphering the hidden patterns and hierarchies that govern the institution. I learn the layout of the labyrinthine corridors. At times I seek comfort in the quiet corners of the facility, away from the din of people screaming and the oppressive weight of confinement. In those moments of solitude I cry softly to myself, remembering my boyfriend and other lovers, my work and the beauty of my earth. I cling to my memories of the City State of Cork, the beautiful reality I have left behind. It is a flickering beacon of hope, reminding me of the possibility for a better existence, even in the darkest of circumstances. I refuse to let this institution extinguish the spark of hope that still burns within me. But then things change. Dr. Rodriguez decides to start electroconvulsive shock therapy on me. He does not even tell me directly. Instead, one of the cleaners, Susie, warns me that they are planning to do this. Susie, probably the only sound and intelligent member of the staff, seems to realize that I am sane. Sometimes Susie brings me a little flower from the garden outside which we are not allowed to visit. I think she doesn't even realize what a difference her kindness makes to me in this unrelenting place of cruelty. I plan to escape, but it is hopeless. Every plan I devise has already been anticipated by the authorities running the institution. It is a hopeless case, and finally, the day arrives for my shock therapy. Having drugged me with a concoction of goodness knows how many pills, powders, and potions, the stern nurse straps me to a gurney, and with the help of 2 orderlies, they are wheeling me to the electroconvulsive therapy room. I look up and count the fluorescent lights that come and go, and I hear the click-clack-click of the wheels of the gurney as we traverse the seemingly endless corridors of the institution. Would they ever repair or obtain new wheels for this accursed gurney? I want to say, but as much as I try to speak, it is impossible. My lips become non-compliant circles of frozen flesh, and all I can do is grunt and drool. The corridors smell like chlorine, and the orderlies are talking about a game they watch on their televisions the previous night. I am just a lump of meat being taken from point alpha to point beta. Eventually, we arrive at our destination. In an unpleasant and helpless haze of dissociation, I gradually become aware of Dr. Rodriguez looking down at me. His eyes seem bulbous, and the whites of his eyes shimmer with the same dazzling white of his medical coat. Reality seems to exist as an elusive blend of disconnected fragments, a random perturbation of mosaic tiles, mere bits and pieces that swirl around like a jigsaw swept onto a carpet of random reds, blues, pinks, and yellows. I struggle to piece the jigsaw together, but my senses are bombarded. Something pulls through my body like a fibrous snake, and my skin crawls with a layer of 1,000,000 tiny scattering beetles. Something sad within me notices the utter bizarreness of existence. Something. Suddenly a jolt of energy courses through my entire body, and everything flashes white, like the white of Rodriguez's coat, or that flashing white that crashes through the heavens in a storm. I am gone. Gone. The android supervisor picks me up and checks my pulse. "Are you all right?" "Yes," I croak. "You really are one dumb motherfucker," he says crossly. "Why the fuck are you playing with these sorts of energetic resonances?" he asks me, but I am too dazed to reply. I get up and kiss the android on the lips. "I am just glad I'm alive," I say, shaken and so happy to be right back in my own world. Dr. Rodriguez is gone, the stern nurse is gone, and Arfisa Kowalski are just memories now. A week has passed, and I have to admit, the shame bites deep into me, and I have some bad news. They have let me go at the World Astronomy program. They say I am too immature for the responsibilities involved, but that they will reconsider reappointing me in some unspecified time in the future, when I am more adult. The android supervisor I kissed actually apologized to me for calling me stupid and letting me do work that was beyond my capacity. So now, I write stories, meet my friends, and enjoy the idyllic world we have. Each day I savor its beauty, its balance, and its harmony. In a way, I have become like those non-sentient androids that have a habit of stating the obvious. I never tire of pointing out the beauty of a sunset, the availability of clean, fresh water, our nourishing foods, our good health, and the fun we are allowed to have all day long. My friends take it for granted and sometimes jokingly call me a donkey, but I know better than to take things for granted. From time to time, I think of Arfisa Kowalski and Dr. Wodwigus, and I feel for their suffering, constrained as they are by the unfortunate realities of a truly horrible world.
The end.
This was a short story from the anthology of science fiction short stories, Exiles of Iron and Light, by Robert J. Forey, available only on Amazon as a Kindle ebook and also as a paperback.